a messenger rode into Karakorum carrying news that would save European civilization. Great Khan Ögedei was dead, killed by alcohol in excess at age 56, and the Mongol princes had to return immediately for the succession crisis. In Hungary, 1,200 miles west, Batu Khan received the message and made a decision that changed history. He would abandon the conquest of Europe and ride home to secure his political position. 2 days earlier, his army of 25,000 had just destroyed 100,000 European soldiers in the most lopsided military catastrophe medieval Europe ever experienced. The Mongols had broken through Hungary's defenses, annihilated its army, and opened the road to Vienna, Paris, and Rome. This is the story of how Europe came within one coincidental death of becoming a Mongol province, and why almost nobody knows it happened. Spring 1241 found Europe completely unprepared for what was coming. The Mongol Empire, stretching from Korea to the Caspian Sea, had been a distant concern for European powers preoccupied with their own conflicts. The Fourth Crusade had recently sacked Constantinople. The Holy Roman Empire was locked in political struggle with the papacy. French and English kings fought over continental territories. Rumors reached Europe about terrifying horsemen from the east who had destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire and conquered Russia, but these seemed like exaggerated tales from barbarous lands. When Mongol armies actually appeared on Hungary's eastern border in early 1241, the continent faced an enemy it neither understood nor could effectively resist. The Mongol invasion of Europe was not improvised raiding but carefully planned conquest. Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, commanded the Western campaign with instructions to extend Mongol power as far west as terrain and logistics permitted. His force numbered perhaps 120,000 to 150,000 total, but he divided them strategically. One army invaded Poland to prevent northern European powers from reinforcing Hungary. Another swept through Moldavia to secure the southern flank. Batu personally led the main force into Hungary, the strategic heart of Eastern Europe. If Hungary fell, the road westward lay open. The Mongols understood this perfectly. So did King Bela IV of Hungary, who recognized he was about to face the storm alone. Bela IV had received warnings. Refugees from the Cuman tribes fleeing Mongol advance had poured into Hungary with tales of unstoppable horsemen who destroyed armies and obliterated cities. Bela granted them asylum, hoping to use their manpower for defense. This decision would prove disastrous. The Hungarian nobility hated the Cumans as foreign barbarians and blamed them for bringing Mongol attention to Hungary. When Mongol ambassadors arrived demanding Bela hand over the Cuman refugees, he refused, understanding that submission now meant vassalage forever. He sent messages to Pope Gregory IX, to Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II, to every European power begging for assistance. The responses were devastating. The Pope sent prayers. Frederick sent nothing, enjoying Hungary's predicament. Other kingdoms sent excuses. Hungary would fight alone. Bela assembled approximately 100,000 soldiers, an enormous army by medieval standards. This included Hungarian nobles with their armed retinues, Croatian troops, Templar knights, and the Cuman warriors whose presence created constant friction. The army gathered near Pest in early April 1241, preparing to intercept the Mongol invasion. Bela had numerical superiority, fortified positions, and home territory advantage. What he lacked was any comprehension of the military revolution about to destroy him. The Mongol army that entered Hungary represented 150 years of refined warfare evolution. Each warrior maintained multiple horses, allowing rapid movement and extended campaigns without the logistical chains that hampered European forces. Their composite bows, made from horn, wood, and sinew, outranged European weapons by 100 yards and could be shot accurately from horseback at full gallop. Armor combined leather and metal plates for protection without sacrificing mobility. They used advanced scouts, detailed intelligence gathering, and coordinated multi-army operations across hundreds of miles. Their commanders had destroyed Chinese dynasties with populations of millions, crushed Persian empires, and obliterated Russian principalities. Hungarian knights, brave and well-equipped, were facing an enemy that had perfected warfare to a degree Europe wouldn't match for centuries. The Mongols advanced into Hungary using their standard strategic approach: divide, terrorize, and coordinate. Smaller forces spread across the country, burning villages and driving refugees westward to create chaos and overwhelm Hungarian logistics. Batu's main force moved deliberately toward Pest, avoiding engagement until conditions were optimal. The Hungarian army tracked them but couldn't force battle. The Mongols were always just out of reach, always moving, always gathering intelligence, while Hungarian commanders grew increasingly frustrated. This was psychological warfare designed to create doubt, exhaust the enemy, and set conditions for decisive engagement when Mongol generals chose the moment. On April 10, 1241, the situation reached crisis point. The Mongols were approaching the Sajo River near the village of Mohi. Bela's army occupied the western bank, blocking the main bridge and controlling what appeared to be the only crossing point. The king's position seemed impregnable, river barrier to his front. His army concentrated, the Mongols unable to cross without attacking a fortified position under devastating fire. Bela deployed guards at the bridge and settled his main force about a mile west, near Mohi village. He believed he could hold indefinitely, forcing the Mongols to either withdraw or suffer catastrophic casualties attempting a frontal assault. What he didn't know was that Mongol engineers were already scouting the river miles north and south, looking for alternate crossings. The trap wasn't for the Mongols. It was for the Hungarians. Night brought the Mongol attack. Under cover of darkness, a force commanded by Subutai, the greatest Mongol general of his generation, moved south and found a ford. They crossed the Sajo silently, circling behind the Hungarian position. Simultaneously, another Mongol force under Batu approached the bridge directly. When dawn broke on April 11th, the Hungarian guards at the bridge faced Mongol troops attacking across the span, using portable shields and supporting fire. The guards held initially, inflicting casualties, but they were fighting the diversion. The real attack was developing in their rear. Subutai's force, having crossed during the night, struck the Hungarian camp from an unexpected direction. The assault came at dawn when soldiers were barely awake, still in their tents, unprepared for combat. Mongol cavalry smashed into the camp's eastern edge, while Batu's forces renewed their bridge attack with increased intensity. The Hungarians suddenly faced coordinated assault from two directions. Their camp penetrated, their defensive position compromised. Bela tried to organize resistance, but medieval command and control collapsed once formation broke. There were no radios, no signal flags that could be seen through the chaos, no way to coordinate tens of thousands of men suddenly fighting for their lives. The Hungarian army began disintegrating under pressure it couldn't process tactically. Mongol horse archers circled the flanks, shooting into massed formations that couldn't effectively respond. European knights charged bravely, but found themselves targeting enemies who simply rode away faster than horses in full armor could pursue, turned at safe distance, and shot back with devastating accuracy. A Mongol warrior could lose 6 arrows while a crossbowman reloaded once. The cumulative effect was thousands of Hungarians being hit by projectiles they couldn't return fire against or escape from. The Cuman warriors, recognizing disaster, broke from the Hungarian formation and fled south. Their departure was tactically sensible for their own survival, but strategically catastrophic for the army. It opened gaps in Hungarian lines and spread panic through troops who saw their allies abandoning them. The Templar Knights fought with fanatical courage, forming defensive positions and holding ground, but they numbered too few to change the battle's trajectory. Hungarian nobles led desperate charges trying to break the Mongol encirclement, achieving nothing except their own deaths at the hands of warriors who refused to stand and fight in the European manner. By mid-morning, the Hungarian army was surrounded and compressing into smaller space under relentless pressure. But then, seemingly inexplicably, the Mongols opened a gap in the western part of the encirclement. Panicked Hungarian soldiers saw the opening and ran for it. Thousands fled through the gap, throwing away weapons and armor, desperate to escape what appeared to be a miracle of survival. This was the killing stroke. The Mongols had created the gap deliberately, using one of their signature tactics, the feigned escape route that transformed organized resistance into a helpless mob. Once the Hungarian formation completely collapsed in the rush to escape through the gap, Mongol cavalry pursued the fleeing mass for miles, cutting down soldiers who couldn't maintain formation or defend themselves individually. The retreat became a massacre that continued for days across the Hungarian countryside. Mongol cavalry hunted fleeing Hungarians systematically, pursuing them into villages and forests. European soldiers who tried to hide were burned out. Those who surrendered were executed. The Mongols made no attempt to take prisoners beyond a few kept for information, sending a message that resistance carried only one price: annihilation. Modern estimates suggest 40,000 to 70,000 Hungarians died at Mohi or in the subsequent pursuit. The Hungarian army had effectively ceased to exist as a military force. King Bela IV barely escaped with his life. He fled west with a small bodyguard, staying ahead of Mongol pursuit by hours. He tried to reach Austria, hoping Emperor Frederick would provide refuge and assistance. Instead, Frederick, displaying the political opportunism that characterized him, imprisoned Bela and extorted territory as ransom for his release. Europe's collective response to Hungary's catastrophe was to exploit it for immediate gain, rather than recognize the existential threat the Mongol victory represented. The Battle of Mohi eliminated Hungary's capacity to resist. The Mongols spent the rest of 1241 systematically devastating the kingdom. They burned cities, destroyed crops, and hunted down Hungarian nobles who tried to organize resistance. Contemporary chronicles describe apocalyptic scenes, fields full of unburied corpses, rivers discolored by blood, entire regions depopulated. Population estimates suggest Hungary lost 15 to 50% of its people to the Mongol invasion. The kingdom that had been Central Europe's bulwark was effectively destroyed as a military power. Simultaneously, the northern Mongol army was achieving parallel results in Poland. At Lenica on April 9th, 2 days before Mohi, they annihilated a Polish-German force using identical tactics: encirclement, archery superiority, feigned retreat, pursuit of broken formations. The Polish Duke Henry II died in the battle, his head later displayed on a spear. The Mongols filled 9 sacks with ears cut from enemy dead, their method of tallying kills. After destroying Polish resistance, they turned south to rejoin Batu's forces in Hungary. By summer 1241, 2 major European armies had been obliterated in the space of a week. Batu Khan now held strategic initiative completely. Vienna lay a week's march west. Northern Italy was accessible through mountain passes. Germany was in political chaos, unable to coordinate defense. France and England, the only kingdoms with military resources to potentially mount resistance, were unprepared and hadn't taken the Mongol threat seriously. The road to Rome, Paris, and London lay open. Mongol generals argued about direction. Should they strike at the Holy Roman Empire's fractured territories, invade Italy through the Alps, or sweep through France toward the Atlantic? The debate became academic in December 1241 when messengers arrived from Karakorum. Great Khan Ögedei was dead. According to Mongol law and tradition, all princes of the royal family had to return to the Mongol capital for the Kurultai, the assembly that would elect the next Khan. Batu Khan, as grandson of Genghis and one of the most powerful princes, had to participate or risk losing political influence over succession. The conquest of Europe would have to wait. In early 1242, the Mongol armies withdrew from Hungary, retreating east as rapidly as they had advanced. The invasion that had annihilated 2 major European armies simply stopped and reversed because of a death thousands of miles away. The European reaction ranged from relief to incomprehension. Most Europeans didn't understand why the Mongols left. Some credited divine intervention, claiming God had protected Christendom at the last moment. Others believed their military resistance had been effective, completely misunderstanding the scale of their defeat. A few perceptive observers recognized the terrifying truth. Europe had been militarily conquered and survived only through coincidental timing. Pope Innocent IV sent emissaries to the Mongol court, seeking to understand these conquerors and prevent future invasions. The Mongol responses were courteous but uncompromising: submit to Mongol authority or face destruction. Europe had no intention of submitting and no capacity to prevent conquest if the Mongols returned with serious intent. The Mongols never did return in force. The succession crisis after Ögedei's death created political instability that lasted years. Batu Khan established the Golden Horde in Russia and focused on consolidating power there rather than resuming Western campaigns. Later, Mongol Khans directed military efforts toward completing the conquest of China, expanding in Persia, and destroying the Abbasid Caliphate rather than targeting Europe. The window for European conquest closed permanently. By the time Mongol politics stabilized, their empire had fractured into competing khanates with diverging interests, and Europe had begun developing military responses to steppe warfare. The moment had passed. The alternate history implications remain staggering. If Ögedei had lived another 5 years, European civilization as we know it would not exist. The Renaissance emerged from Italian city-states that would have been Mongol vassals. The Catholic Church's institutional continuity, already shaken by the Fourth Crusade sack of Constantinople, might have been destroyed completely under Mongol occupation. The technologies, philosophies, and political systems that emerged from medieval Europe developed in a context of relative independence from Asian influence. Under Mongol rule, those developments would have followed entirely different paths or never occurred. Modern Western civilization is built on foundations laid in the centuries after 1241. Remove those foundations, and the entire structure of the modern world looks unrecognizable. The military lessons of Mohi demonstrated conclusively that European warfare was inferior to Mongol methods. Heavy cavalry charges, the backbone of European tactics, were easily countered by mobile horse archers who could shoot accurately from horseback while retreating. European armies relied on individual prowess and courage, where Mongols employed coordination, discipline, and tactical sophistication developed over generations. The composite bow, which European armies would eventually adopt in modified form as the longbow, was already standard Mongol equipment used with greater skill than English archers would demonstrate a century later at Crécy. European commanders who thought battles were won by frontal assault faced opponents who won through maneuver, intelligence gathering, and psychological manipulation. The gap in military effectiveness was so large that a 3-to-1 numerical advantage meant nothing. Some European powers eventually learned from Mohi's lessons, though the process took generations and was never completed before gunpowder revolutionized warfare. The importance of mobility, ranged weapons, and coordination gradually became recognized. The rise of professional armies over feudal levies reflected partial understanding that training and discipline mattered more than numbers or individual valor. But these adaptations came slowly, implemented unevenly, and many European kingdoms never fully absorbed the lessons. The Mongols had perfected a military system that dominated the medieval world, and at Mohi they demonstrated its superiority in the most decisive manner possible. The Hungarian experience shaped European consciousness for centuries in ways both obvious and subtle. Chronicles described the Mongols as demons sent by God to punish Christian sins, as apocalyptic horsemen heralding the end times. The terror of Asian invasion became embedded in European cultural memory, influencing attitudes toward nomadic peoples and Asian civilizations generally. This trauma, combined with the Crusades and later Ottoman expansion, helped define European identity partially in opposition to threats from the East. The near conquest by the Mongols became a foundational myth used to justify later European expansionism as defensive necessity against existential threats. Modern Hungary commemorates Mohi with monuments and memorials, but the battle's significance extends far beyond Hungarian national history. It represents the closest Europe came to being conquered by an external power during the medieval period. The Roman Empire had collapsed from within. The Islamic expansion had been stopped at Tours and Constantinople. The Viking raids had been absorbed and Christianized. Only the Mongols actually defeated major European armies in the field and opened the continent to complete conquest. That conquest didn't happen, but the possibility's terrifying proximity shaped European development in subtle ways. Subutai, the Mongol general who executed the flanking movement at Mohi, was 66 years old when he achieved this victory. He had been campaigning since his youth under Genghis Khan himself, participating in the conquest of China, the destruction of the Khwarezmian Empire, and the subjugation of Russia. Mohi was one of his final battles before retirement, a capstone on a military career spanning 5 decades and including more than 65 pitched battles without a single defeat. European commanders at Mohi were facing not just superior tactics, but one of history's greatest military minds at the peak of his capabilities. The mismatch was almost unfair, like watching a professional boxer fight an enthusiastic amateur. The outcome was predetermined by the vast gap in experience, training, and systematic understanding of warfare. The bridge at Mohi still exists, rebuilt many times but occupying the same strategic location. The battlefield itself has been partially excavated by archaeologists, revealing mass graves and artifacts confirming the battle's scale and brutality. Standing there today, knowing what happened, the terrain's tactical significance becomes obvious. The Sajo River seems like a perfect defensive barrier until you realize it can be forded miles up or downstream by anyone willing to scout properly. The flat ground beyond seems ideal for European cavalry until you imagine thousands of horse archers circling, shooting, retreating at will, making close combat impossible. The position Bela thought was impregnable was actually a trap, and he walked into it because he couldn't conceive of an enemy that would cross a river at night, coordinate attacks from multiple directions, and execute complex battlefield maneuvers that European armies wouldn't master for centuries. European sources from the period struggle to explain what happened at Mohi. Some describe Mongol tactics accurately, noting the discipline, coordination, and tactical sophistication that characterized their operations. Others fall back on demonization, portraying the Mongols as supernatural threats beyond human understanding or combat. Both responses reflect psychological difficulty, processing military defeat of such magnitude against an enemy that didn't fight by recognized rules. The Europeans were accustomed to warfare as a contest of courage, strength, and divine favor. The Mongols treated warfare as a science to be studied, refined, and executed with mechanical precision. The cognitive dissonance created by encountering this approach took generations to process. The question of whether the Mongols could actually have conquered all of Europe remains debated by historians. Logistical challenges would have been immense. Europe's geography, with its forests, mountains, and fortified cities, differed from the open steppes where Mongol cavalry operated optimally. Supply lines would have stretched dangerously thin across territories that had to be held while advancing further west. Winter campaigns in Western Europe would have been more difficult than the Russian winters the Mongols had already mastered. Some historians argue that Mongol power had reached its natural limit, that European geography and military adaptation would eventually have stopped them regardless of Ögedei's death. Others point out that the Mongols had overcome similar challenges in forested China, mountainous Persia, and fortified Central Asia, and that Europe in 1241 was militarily helpless, with no effective response to Mongol tactics. We'll never know for certain, but the possibility that European civilization survived through timing rather than strength remains profoundly unsettling. The legacy of Mohi is the realization that history pivots on accidents and coincidences as much as on great men and grand strategies. Ögedei's death from alcoholism at age 56, combined with Mongol inheritance customs that required princes to return for succession councils, saved Europe from conquest. Not European valor, not divine intervention, not geographical advantage, but the medical consequences of excessive drinking and a cultural tradition about political legitimacy. Every subsequent development of Western civilization depended on survival in 1241 to 1242, and that survival was coincidental rather than earned. The universities of Oxford and Paris flourished because a Mongol Khan drank too much. The Protestant Reformation occurred because Batu Khan prioritized succession politics over conquest. The voyages of Columbus launched from a Spain that existed independently because of a death in Karakorum. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain rather than Central Asia because of decisions made 500 years earlier by people responding to events they couldn't control. April 11th, 1241, dawned cold over the Sajo River. By noon, 70,000 soldiers were dead or dying in the largest military catastrophe medieval Europe experienced. By evening, Hungary had ceased to exist as a military power capable of defending itself. By summer, Europe was defenseless, its armies destroyed, its kingdoms unable to coordinate response, its future in the hands of Mongol generals deciding which direction to ride. Then a messenger arrived from Karakorum with news of a death, and everything changed. The Mongols packed up and rode east, leaving behind devastation and a continent that didn't understand how close it had come to oblivion. Somewhere in a parallel universe where Ögedei lived another decade, Europeans speak a language descended from Mongolian, pray in Buddhist temples or practice shamanic traditions, and developed civilization along entirely different paths. We live in this universe instead, not because we were stronger or smarter or divinely favored, but because we were present when coincidence intervened. That's what happened at Mohi. Europe was about to end, and then a Khan died at the right moment in the right place, and the ending was postponed indefinitely. The battle nobody remembers is the reason our world exists.